Sorry about that.
So first off, just want to ask you guys to talk a little bit about going to that kind of branding question. So what do you guys see as sort of the challenges and opportunities for using content to support branding?
I mean, well, the initial thought is that branding through content it's immediately twofold, because you're dealing with both the visual presentation of the content itself, so your visual brand, and then your brand identity or your brand messaging, I guess, which is kind of the other important aspect. And I mean, I know that at BU we have kind of an overarching BU experience that we're trying to kind of explain through multitudinous storytelling. But I think that's your set goal, is identifying what your brand is, and then just consistently playing towards that theme. You know, if you're Coca-Cola, your brand is happiness. You just play towards that theme.
I think just to add to that, one of the things that Emerson just went through a web redesign a year ago, last March, so a little over a year ago. And it was also sort of a marketing redesign too, of what are the key components that we're marketing out. And especially in my office, I need to market out to the new incoming classes. So I need to find those students that are looking for certain things. And I think the problem was we had very generic, I assume a lot of higher ed has this very generic idea of what your content is. Like, we have to talk about academics, we have to talk about this. But the tough thing for us in branding was, what separates us from that next school right down the street? Yeah, we have different majors available, but what about our students? What are we looking for? So I think when I was looking at content, I was thinking of content not just, let me get a faculty member to talk about their class. It was, what's a cool interaction between a faculty and a student that totally speaks to Emerson College as a brand? So I think that's one of the challenges in branding, is that you have to think to the next level. You know, you can't just assume that we're higher ed. You know, everybody's in higher ed. We're all competing against each other. But what can you do to help a student make that informed decision about where they're going to go to college?
And I guess I would just add that the content has to support the brand, or else it all sort of falls apart. You know, it seems, I don't know, it just seems kind of obvious to me that why wouldn't your content support your brand, and even further support your institutional goals and priorities?
Do you have any good examples of how you've been able to help content contributors to be on brand in their content creation?
I think it's funny, because the initial question is, how do you sort of enable people to create content for you? And then, you know, you could reach out to your audience and they're creating a ton of different, you know, types of content, but then it's, okay, let's narrow the focus a little bit. I think that's what a lot of schools fall into, that trap of, let's create a student blog and have them post about their student experience. It can be all over the place. You can get students posting about what they did on a Saturday night versus what classes are like. And I think what happens is, with enabling, you know, people to produce content for you, the best thing that you can do is immediately reach out to them and say, these are some suggestions, not guideline suggestions, I hate using that. Let me throw out some ideas on what works well with our audience. You know, think of phrasing it in that way, and then that lets people go, oh, I got an idea about that, let me start producing. Really, they don't realize they're actually just supporting your brand with content, but you're just giving them a little bit of direction when you're doing that.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that the pieces that do better are the more value-oriented, the more service-oriented pieces that people can immediately gain something from. And if that's storytelling, a lot of times people are more interested in reading success stories, I've found, than personal interest. It's not to say personal interest doesn't have value, it has tons of value, but that it's just a general interest level thing that I think that our users have, because they have a vested interest in college and they want to continuously, even beyond graduation, get something from their school. Information, career info.
One of the challenges that I face in the alumni office is that we actually have kind of multiple, I don't want to say competing interests, but there's the Tufts brand, there's the Tufts alumni brand, and then, for instance, I'm working on a new Young Alumni Weekend, so it's the Back to the Hill brand. So it's, how do you get the content out in a way that engages your specific audience or all of your audiences without confusing them, and then while still engaging the right people at the same time? So it's almost, which brand do I use? And Tufts alumni tweets this, and do I retweet that, or do I leave it, and then Tufts tweets it? And there's just a lot of competing interests for the same audience in some ways. So.
How do you tackle that?
Everyone has any good ideas? You know, I mean, part of it is we do have a social media group that's open university-wide, which has become very helpful for us. But you know, there's a team in the communications office and our internal our advancement communications office that does the Tufts alumni Twitter and Facebook, and I do Tufts Alumni Boston and Tufts Alumni Back to the Hill. Georgy does Tufts. So we haven't found necessarily a good way to streamline it, but we do talk, and sometimes I'll call Georgy or I'll call the Tufts alumni and say, can you respond to this for me, or do you want me to respond to it? Or it's hard though, because we're all in different departments or different offices, so we're still working on it.
Yeah.
If anyone else is.
We have the same basic thing. I mean, we have two really major accounts, which is one is like the BU social presence, and then we have the alumni social presence. And then we have BU Today, and we have Bostonian. They have a fraction of the followers, a fraction of the audience. So it's, I don't know, we've been discussing recently, or just hypothetically, should those followers be opened up in the same way that email addresses are opened up? And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that's a discussion worth having. Is how do you control consistently your content to the right channels, so that you're not competing and you're not missing out. And then if you're publishing your content across multiple channels, the same content, let's say you write an article that has to do with a CIS student, and then an arts and sciences school student, and the arts and sciences school puts it on their website, and then your news site puts it on their website, and then your alumni magazine posts it. It's like, well, which one is the best one to put out? And then when you put that out, are you upsetting the two offices that want to get their content in front? It's kind of it's all very competitive within itself, which is kind of your I think communication really is the key there.
And just talking about something with that, one of the things that I always focus on is connecting our prospective students with conversations going on campus with current students, getting them talking to a current student or a parent talking to a current parent. And the funny thing is sometimes there's a news article that ends up on a specific content channel that I want to put on a general channel and lead students into that general channel, because I know there's going to be some conversation around that piece that they would probably want to have insight into and say like, oh cool, I feel like I'm part of the school because I'm seeing what they're talking about. But generally what happens is that you take that content, pick it up, all the conversation that's going on gets left there, and you're putting it on another channel and you lose all that context to it. So I think that's a challenge too, that I always try to drive people at least to one central spot where I know it's going to be picked up by a ton of different audiences, and you might not think, prospective student wants to see this, but I'm the first advocate to say, hey, prospective students should see anything where there's a lot of activity at the school. They want to be part of that,
Nathaniel, one thing I wanted to follow up with you on is to point about relationships, and we were talking a little bit about processes, like with the social media group at Tufts. I was just reading recently the editorial brand guidelines and the style brand guidelines that you guys have for social media and whatnot. So to that point you were making earlier about sort of the visual and how that supports the content, how do you sort of get content contributors around the university to have those visual guidelines and those brand guidelines infused into the content that gets created university-wide, and how does that play out?
The way I do it is I have to be a brand policeman. I literally have to send emails and call people up or tweet people and say, you can't use our logo as your avatar. We can't have 50 of our own logo out on Twitter. It's completely unclear. So what I tell them is I try to consider your social presence as an extension of your web overall digital presence, and if you don't really think you have a visual aesthetic to your digital presence, well, your social presence is your opportunity to create one. So it's really, I try to approach it with that in mind, because then you don't come at them heavy-handed with a brand policeman handcuffs. You give them a positive opportunity to actually have some fun with their accounts. I think that's really important.
Do you entertain question from audience at this
Sure. If you have a couple of follow-up questions from these guys.
Okay, so just talking about the content, you said about there will be different segregations, like it will be alumni or it will be current students or the prospective students, right? And if you're talking about web content, it could be like the people prefer to have like RSS feed there, or they want to go to your blog and they want to read the contents, right? How do you ensure that because these are three different sets of people, the prospective students who are coming in, they're not interested in what is happening in the alumni committee. Right. Alumni is not interested in what you say about prospective students, right? So do you segregate your site into three different sections, or like how do you manage these three different, or like there could be multiple verticals like this? So how do you channelize your content into verticals so that it is relevant for that group of people?
I think just speaking to what we do, Emerson's a total enrollment of about 4,000 students, so it's a smaller school. So a lot of the content that we can, if we segment our site too much, we're reaching an audience of 20. When it, why even produce content for that? But what we generally find is that when we're producing a news article and we stick to that, those 4 pillars, those 4 marketing pillars that we always say we're going to follow. What tends to happen is that if you add, I talked about context around an article before too. If a news piece comes out that talks about an alumni doing something interesting at the college, 2 years graduated, right? Alums are going to find that interesting. It's kind of geared towards them. It's geared towards some current students looking for what they want to do. And yeah, you can say that a prospective student might read that, but they're more interested about what am I going to do first year rather than what am I going to do, 4 years out. I think what you do across the different sections of your site is you just add a little bit of context to the article to relate it to that audience, and then let the article speak for itself as long as it has the content that you need. Where if I post something to the Facebook group for prospective students, I'm not just going to copy and paste what goes out on the general feed for the college. I'm going to add a sentence or two to say, hey, look what you could be doing 2 years out of school, talk to the student, or if you have any questions about career services or anything like that, let me know. So I think it's just about adding like a line or two of context before you send it out to that next channel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we have segregation. We have the Tufts website, and Tufts alumni has a separate website. And I know we're just lucky we do have communication. Georgy, the Tufts Twitter account, for instance, has how many, 20,000 followers? Or
no.
Not that high.
Like
Seems
7,000.
7,000. Our alumni one might only have a few thousand. My little Back to the Hill Young Alumni one has like 49 working on it. But what was great was, I follow most of the big Tufts Twitter accounts, and when admissions admitted the class of 2015, I think it is, they were tweeting about it. Georgy tweeted about it. Tufts alumni tweeted about it. I tweeted about it. That was the highest number of visits I ever had to my event blog, because we kind of all work off of each other. So we're segmented, but we kind of work in tandem where we can to help each other out and get each other attention for what's relevant at the time.
And I think too, you have to recognize that a parent or a student and an alum might all be following the main college Twitter feed or Facebook page or whatever. So that can be challenging too. I know at the last school I was at, I was also on the social media committee, and we were in charge of the Facebook page, and we struggled with who's our audience, right? So mainly students, sure, and mainly families, yeah, but alumni, absolutely. Even though there was a separate alumni page, and so it's segmented, and that's great, but it also mixes together.
And I find that in higher ed, you often have those milestones that really just bring everyone